Welcome to Family History Mysteries, a podcast that tells the stories uncovered through family history research, the unexpected stories of everyday people. I am an avid family historian who has been compiling my family tree for over 15 years, with nearly 20,000 people recorded in my trees. And please put a review on my podcast. That will certainly help in getting the word out there and creating more listenership. Episode 167, Lieutenant James. Lieutenant Thomas James of the Royal Navy died in 1857. In 1937, the hunt was on to find his children to be claimants in a relative's estate. Articles were placed in Australian newspapers as the solicitors handling the relative's estate believed that some wider family members had emigrated. Why did it take so long? Well, Douglas Hoskin Harper James died on the 29th of March 1936 in Bristol, England, and he was the last surviving child of Thomas James's brother, Sir Henry James. Sir Henry James was a Royal Engineers officer who was knighted in 1860. He had 3 children, but it seems that none of them had children of their own, resulting in the last child alive, Douglas Hoskin Harper James, leaving an estate for his next of kin. Douglas had legally separated from his wife, Jane, in 1903, hence for the hunt for the wider family members. In the Daily Mail in London, public and legal notices. Notice is hereby given that Douglas Hoskin Harper James Esquire, lately residing in Oxford Road, Putney, in the county of Surrey, having executed a deed of separation from his wife, Jane James, whereby a sufficient allowance for her maintenance is secured to her, and he is not responsible for any debts contracted by the said Jane James. And this was dated the 17th day of February 1903. So who was Lieutenant Thomas James? Well, he was born on the 16th of October 1797 in Truro, Cornwall, England, and he was the son of John James and Jane Hoskin. His other siblings were the firstborn Eliza Johanna James, who was born on the 20th of December 1793 in Cornwall. She married William Carn in 1822. They had 5 children, and Eliza died in 1859 in England. The next child, John, was born in 1795 at Rosenvale, Cornwall, England. He married Sarah Raby in 1801, and John died in April 1875 in Truro, Cornwall. John and Sarah had a son, Frederick Hoskin James, who died in the wreck of the St George in 1811 when he was only 15. The 4th sibling, Edward James, was born on the 24th of February 1799 at Truro. He was a lieutenant in the Royal Navy and married Letitia Agnes Palmer in 1828. Edward died in India on the 16th of June 1831, aged only 32. They had one son, Edward, who died as an infant. His 5th sibling, Joseph Hoskin James, was born in 1800 in Truro. In 1817 in Cornwall, he was indentured to serve his father, John James, in his role of attorney at law. In 1820, he was indentured to act as a clerk to John Hendy of King's Bench for a period of 5 years. He married Mary Holland in Finsbury on the 10th of October 1837, and by this stage he was a solicitor. Joseph died in August 1841 in Jersey and on the Channel Islands, and he was a town clerk and county coroner that was based at Truro. They had no children. Maria was born on the 14th of August 1801 in Truro and died on the 18th of February 1815, aged 13 years. And Jane was born on the 5th of August 1804 in Truro. She married Colonel John Freak Palmer in 1825 and they had 3 children. Emma, who was born in India in 1828, William, born in Burma in 1829, and Henry, born in Burma in 1838. Emma lived with William and his family in 1871, but she did not marry. William married Mary Ann Hicks on the 15th of November 1858 in Bath, Somerset, England. They had 4 children, and he was a captain in the army, and they lived at Paddington in England, and he died in 1888. Henry Spencer Palmer was the youngest of the children, and he was a Major General Royal Engineer and was born at Bangalore, Madras Presidency on the 30th of April 1838. He was educated at private schools at Bath and by private tutors at Woolwich and Plumstead, and in January 1856 obtained admission to the practical class of the Royal Military Academy at Woolwich. He secured 7th place in a public competition among 40 successful candidates, of whom he was the youngest. He was gazetted as a lieutenant in the Royal Engineers on the 20th of December and went to Chatham for instruction. From Chatham he went to the Southern District at the end of 1857 and was quartered at Portsmouth and in the Isle of Wight. In October 1858, Palmer was appointed to the expedition to British Columbia under Colonel Richard Clement Moody. The expedition was originated by Lord Lytton, then Secretary of State for the colonies, and consisted of 6 officers and 150 picked artificers and surveyors from the Royal Engineers, with the double object of acting as a military force to preserve order, but also to carry out engineering works and surveys for improvement of the newly created colony. During Palmer's service with the expedition, he was actively engaged in making surveys and explorations, among them a reconnaissance survey of the famous Caribou Gold region in 1862. In that year, Henry and his party were saved by his coolness and address and his knowledge of the Indian character from massacre by the Ballacoola Indians at the North Bentinck Arm. The reports and maps prepared by Henry in connection with these surveys were published from time to time in parliamentary and colonial blue books. Palmer returned to England at the end of December 1863 and joined the Ordnance Survey. He first went to Southampton and then to Tunbridge, Kent, from which place as headquarters he conducted a survey of the greater part of Kent and East Sussex and parts of Berkshire and Buckinghamshire. He was promoted second captain in March 1866. In autumn of 1867, he was appointed as one of the assistant commissioners in the Parliamentary Boundaries Commission. Their district embraced the parliamentary boroughs of Kent and East Sussex and West Kent and East Surrey. He went to Sinai in October 1868 and returned to England in May 1869, where he resumed his survey work at Tunbridge. Palmer contributed handsome volumes, which were the fruits of the expedition, that included descriptive matter plus computation of astronomical and other works of the survey. After his return home, he often lectured on the subject. Palmer was promoted Major on the 11th of December 1873. In this year, he was recommended to the Astronomer Royal by Admiral G.H. Richards, then hydrographer to the Admiralty, for a chief astronomership in one of the expeditions to observe the transit of Venus. He was nominated chief of the New Zealand Party and went through a course of practical preparation at the Royal Observatory in Greenwich. He left England in June 1874, and he was highly praised by the Astronomer Royal in his report to the Board of Visitors in 1875. He rendered assistance to the French in determining the longitude of Campbell Island, for which he received the Medal of the Institute of France. Palmer returned to England in June 1875. He resumed his military duty and went to Barbados in November 1875. He was appointed aide-de-camp to the Governor, Sir John Pope Hennessy, and remained in this post through the riots of 1876 until the Governor's departure from the colony. In January 1878, he went to Hong Kong, where in addition to his ordinary duties, he was appointed engineer of the Admiralty Works and once again was given the post of aide-de-camp to the Governor. On the 1st of July 1881, he was promoted brevet lieutenant colonel. In this year, he designed a physical observatory for Hong Kong to comprehend astronomical, magnetical, meteorological and tidal observations. On the 1st of October 1882, he was promoted regimental lieutenant colonel and was ordered home. On his way, he stayed at the British legation in Tokyo, Japan, and was requested at the instance of Sir Harry Parkes by the Japanese government to prepare a project for waterworks for Yokohama. On Palmer's arrival in England in July 1883, he was appointed commanding Royal Engineer of the Manchester District. In the autumn of 1884, the Japanese government applied to the British government for Palmer's services to superintend the construction of waterworks in accordance with his design. Permission was given and Palmer reached Japan in April 1885 and work started. On the 1st of July 1885, Palmer was promoted to brevet colonel, and on the 1st of October 1887 he retired on a pension with the honorary rank of Major General. The same date saw the successful completion of the waterworks, and in November he received from the Emperor of Japan the 3rd class of the Order of the Rising Sun in recognition of his services. Subsequently, he received the Queen's permission to wear the order. In 1889, he was also appointed engineer to the Yokohama Docks Company. It was while engaged in designing an extensive system of graving docks and a repairing basin that he died at Tokyo on the 10th of March 1893. He was only 54 when he died, the cause being typhoid fever. He was buried at the Aoyama Cemetery in Tokyo. said that Palmer was a man of clear, vigorous intellect and breadth and liberality of view. He had an extraordinary faculty for rapid calculation and a rare power of assimilating and marshalling facts. He took a lively interest in Japan, and his graphic letters to the Times, written in a genial and sympathetic spirit, did much to familiarise Englishmen with the remarkable people amongst whom he dwelt. He possessed a keen sense of humour and a power of anecdote. Palmer had married on the 7th of October 1863 at New Westminster, British Columbia, to Mary Jane Pearson, daughter of Archdeacon Wright. They had 6 children all up, and at some point around 1890 he remarried to a refined Japanese woman, Uta Sato, with whom he had a daughter. Jane, Henry's mother, died on the 24th of May 1838 at Bangalore in India, and she was only 33, and she died less than a month after her youngest son Henry's birth. Another sibling was Mary, who was born on the 8th of November 1805 in Truro, Cornwall. She married Charles Heathcote Wilson in about 1836, and they had 2 children. Charles Paulley Wilson, whose son was William Vernon Wilson. And on the 4th of May 1937, there was an article in the paper saying, "Heir to English fortune found." William Vernon Wilson, missing heir to an English fortune, has been found in Melbourne. Wilson, who arrived here from England in 1906, has been living obscurely in poor circumstances for years and has lately only been earning 30 shillings a week as a labourer. He is keeping his whereabouts a secret, but he has satisfied the Melbourne representatives of the English solicitors handling the estate, and it has been proven that he is the man that was being sought. He's produced photographs and documents to prove his identity. The solicitors have no exact information about the value of the estate, but they know that it is substantial. The estate was left under the will of Lieutenant Thomas James, who served in the Royal Navy and died in Cornwall some years ago. He had 7 children, all whom migrated to different parts of the world and whose whereabouts have been since sought by Lieutenant James's executors. Wilson, who's 58, was originally a ship's officer, but he's not been to sea since he arrived in Australia, and he has no dependents. Members of another branch of the James family who are thought to be in Australia are still being sought. They are Edward James, Charles Andrew James, John James and Tom Henry James that settled at Templestowe, Victoria in 1864. The solicitors have also learnt that a member of a third branch of the family was carrying his swag in Central Australia in 1886, but he was an old man at that time and it's thought that he's deceased. And a month later, bringing legacy to Australia in London. Although he has come to claim an inheritance of £15,000, Mr. William Vernon Wilson, a Melbourne casual labourer, had to borrow £5 from a friend on his arrival at Tilbury for the expenses of his first few days in London. He says he's not impressed by London's tubes and motor cars. He told the Sunday Graphic that he'd had enough of England and would leave again on his return to Australia almost immediately. And in the Port Pirie Recorder in South Australia on the 25th of September 1937, it tells the story of William Wilson. Red, who struck it rich. William Wilson is enjoying life. Picturesque figure at Pirie Junction. A picturesque figure emerged from the transcontinental train when it pulled into the Pirie Junction yesterday morning. A squat figure wearing a scarlet shirt, he puffed contentedly on a short pipe and swept a disdainful glance at his surroundings. He was Mr. William Vernon Wilson, a communist of the real red type. Rings on his fingers, a wristlet watch, various gold coins on his watch chain, and a scarlet silk handkerchief peeped out of his breast pocket, topped with bright green socks. Mr. Wilson had a decided air of affluence. A representative of the Recorder met him in a compartment on the Adelaide train where he sat quietly smoking. "Yes," he said, "I am a member of the Communist Party and have just returned from London where I went to collect £10,000. "Are they funds for organisation of the party?" he was asked. And he responded, "Blazes, no, I drew it for myself from the Douglas James estate. I am no organiser of the party and I am out to enjoy life for myself. I have no use for Lions or Labour, they are all tarred with the one brush. Communism is the only remedy for the world's troubles." Mr. Wilson said he came out to Australia 37 years ago and had been following work on the Melbourne waterfront ever since. 30 bob a week has been about the average that I've earned, he said. Death of a number of relatives in England sent solicitors on his trail and he was raised from the 30 bob to comparative affluence. "I am going to live on my income and I do not think there will be much left for those who come after me," he remarked. I am going to return to London and I hope to do something there for the class to whom I belonged for 37 years. Mr. Wilson is a devout apostle of the red. One of his first moves when he secured his legacy was to purchase a home in Shirley, England. He erected a neat flagpole in the front garden and sent the red flag to the head of it. He then sailed for Australia, and after he departed he was informed that the folk of Shirley, evidently disliking his politics, had replaced it with a Union Jack. He immediately ordered that the red flag should be replaced and protected with barbed wire. It made no difference, and Mr. Wilson was informed by cable that the Union Jack had again made its appearance and that a man had been arrested and charged with having been unlawfully on the premises. Mr. Wilson declared that so far as he knew, the red flag was still flying at his home in England. At that he lit his short pipe and stared moodily through the window, and the interview was over. Charles Pooley Wilson also had a sister, Mary Wilson, but she died on the 15th of July 1841 in East Indies, aged only 35. Another sibling was Edith Edgecombe Hoskin James, who was born on the 27th of June 1807 in Truro. She married Lieutenant General Thomas Polwheel on the 11th of February 1830 in Truro. They had 3 children that were born in India and the East Indies, and Edith died in June 1884 at Gloucestershire, United Kingdom. Another sibling, Ellen James, was born on the 20th of September 1808 in Truro. She died in April 1902 in Berkshire, England, aged 93. She did not marry. Another sibling, Richard Hoskin James, was born on the 15th of March 1810 in Truro. He married Elizabeth Joyce Watts in September 1840 at Truro, and Richard died in 1849 at Uttakamund, Tamil Nadu, India, aged only 39. Another sibling, Caroline Ann Hoskin James, was born on the 21st of May 1813 in Truro. She married Major General Charles Pooley on the 1st of May 1832 at Kenwyn in Cornwall. They had 8 children with 6 surviving infancy, and Caroline died on the 27th of June 1850 at sea at Sulawesi Tengah in Indonesia, aged only 37. So Thomas James married Emma Andrews on the 15th of July 1833 at St Giles in the Fields, Camden in London, when he was 35 and Emma 23. And the short marriage notice says, married in London, Lieutenant Thomas James R.N., son of the late John James, Esquire of Truro, to Emma, second daughter of the late H.P. Andrews, Esquire of Bordeen, Cornwall. Thomas James and Emma Andrews had 7 children. However, Emma died in childbirth in 1843. Thomas then married Elizabeth Ann Spettig on the 20th of June 1845 in Launceston, Cornwall, England. He was 47 and Elizabeth 41. In 1851, they were living at Stratton Terrace in Cornwall and had 4 servants, and Thomas at this stage was on half pay. And Thomas died in February 1857 at Prestbury, Cheshire, England, aged 59. And his second wife, Elizabeth, died in 1882. So Thomas and Emma James's children. The firstborn was Maria Jane James, who was born in 1834 at St Leonard's, Sussex, England, and she died on the 21st of March 1879 in Plymouth, Devon, England, and she did not marry. The second child, Thomas Henry, was born on the 1st of February 1836 at St Leonard's. He was a civil engineer and married Margaret Finnegan in 1854, and he died on the 17th of May 1880 in Devon, England. The third child was Frederick David James, who was born in 1838 at Rottingdean, Sussex, England. He married Mary Ann Pennison in 1861 in Strathalbyn, South Australia, when he was 25 and Mary 18. He listed himself as a seaman on the marriage certificate and that his usual address at the time of the marriage was Malang, South Australia. They had 4 children, and his death notice states that Frederick James, who died at Port Augusta in 1879, left 4 children: Elizabeth Ann, who married Frank Booth of Farina Town, South Australia in 1887, Emma Jane, who married James O'Donnell, Harriet Frances Palmer, who became Mrs O'Hearn, and William Henry, the youngest, born at Blenheim, South Australia in 1869. Frederick David James died on the 21st of October 1879 at Peachy Reachy Pass near Port Augusta in South Australia, and the article outlining his death is titled Fatal Accident. An accident occurred in the Peachy Reachy Pass on Tuesday last, which resulted in the death of a man named Frederick James who was driving a wagon loaded with wool. The inquest was held on Wednesday morning at the Port Augusta Courthouse with a jury of 12, and the following facts were elicited.
About midday on Tuesday, Frederick James was driving his team through the pass towards Port Augusta, and when going down an incline on the road, when there was a small cutting, he attempted to screw up the brake, and the bullocks having drawn towards the side of the road, he was caught between the load and the bank of the cutting and knocked down, when his legs slipped down under the wheels. The wheels, in passing over the poor fellow's legs, literally crushed them to a pulp just above his ankles. There was a lad with James at the time, and he ran forward and got assistance from the driver of another team, which was a little in advance. The driver of this team, George Austin, after picking the wounded man up and putting him in the shade of a tree, went back to Mr. Beauchamp's for assistance to take him to Port Augusta. On his way down, James spoke to the driver of the trap twice, the last time being when they arrived near Stirling, about 5 miles from Port Augusta. Here the driver gave him a drink of lemonade and brandy and did not hear him speak or move again. He drove the trap to Dr. Markham's house when the man was found to be dead. Mr. Markham said that upon examining the man when brought to his place, that his legs were both broken just above the ankle and he'd bled very much and must have died from exhaustion. He was placed properly, lying on a mattress with a rug over him. The witness thought that those who had dealt with the case had done the best they could according to their judgment in sending him down, and that the nature of the injuries, he thought that if a surgeon had been sent for and amputation had been performed as soon as possible, his life still could not have been saved. The deceased was driving a team belonging to Mr. J. Wade of Kingswood, in whose employ he had been for a few weeks, and was said to be a steady man and quite sober at the time of the accident. The jury, after short deliberation, returned a verdict of accidental death, with no blame being attached to anyone. It says Charles James, through the medium of Mrs. Fitz of the Port Augusta Hotel, requests us to return his sincere thanks to those who, by their subscriptions, assisted in the burial of his late brother Frederick James, who was accidentally killed on his journey from Corn. The fourth child was Jane Palmer James, and she was born on the 26th of November 1838 at Falmouth, Cornwall, England, and she died aged 47 on the 15th of January 1886 at Dartington in Devon, England, and she did not marry. Fifth child, Charles Andrew James, was born in 1841 at Falmouth, Cornwall, England, and he emigrated in 1865 to Australia with his wife Emma. And as mentioned, he was living in Port Augusta, where his brother Frederick died in 1879. And it says that Charles was supposed to have lived at Narracourt in South Australia, but he had not been heard of after 1894. And I couldn't find a definitive death record for Charles. The next child was Edward James, who was born in 1842 at Falmouth, Cornwall, England. He married Elizabeth Harris in Victoria in 1864. They had one son, Thomas Henry Andrew Hoskin James, in Templestowe, Victoria in 1865. Thomas married Annie Miller and died in Campbellfield, Victoria in 1924. Edward James died on the 6th of March 1866 at Bundur Station, north of Jerilderie in New South Wales, although it was stated his usual residence was in Templestowe, Victoria. And the seventh child was Emma Andrew James, who was born on the 2nd of August 1843 in Falmouth, Cornwall, England, and she died on the 14th of October 1921 in Devon, England. So on the 11th of April 1937, this was the advertisement looking for relatives. James and Wilson wanted relatives of Douglas Hoskin Harper James, deceased, and William Vernon Wilson. Any descendants of Frederick James, Charles Andrew James, and Edward James may be entitled to a share of property in England. All three were sons of Lieutenant Thomas James, RN of Cornwall, who died in 1857. Rewards will be paid for proof of death of any of these persons or the present whereabouts of them, if living, or of any descendants. Information is also required of William Vernon Wilson, a seaman, son of Captain Charles Paulley Wilson, a first cousin of Douglas James, not heard of since 1908 when he was in Melbourne. A reward will be paid for proof of the present address or date of death, or whereabouts of a widow or children, if any. All applications to be sent to Rudd & Co. London, or of Moore, Hamilton and Durham of the Bank of Australia Asia Building in Melbourne. And on the 28th of May 1937, it announces that 6 other beneficiaries under wills of relatives of Lieutenant James have been located near Alice Springs. So this was a little bit of a treasure hunt to work out the family members of this family and to see that there were family members that were able to benefit from the James family estate.
If you are interested in sharing your story on my podcast, Family History Mysteries, please go to my Facebook page and send me a message. If you would like some assistance in filling in the gaps in your family tree to see what mysteries you solve, please get in touch. And don't forget, you can have early access to episodes by subscribing, and you'll also gain access to bonus episodes.